Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my beautiful hot messes. My name is Mistress Lavender, and welcome to my reading YouTube channel. If you're looking for my other YouTube channel for regular content, it's A Beautiful Hot Mess, AYE Beautiful Hot Mess. But yeah, if you're at the right YouTube channel, welcome. We're reading the 40 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I'm on page 69. On Law 9, win through your actions, never through argument. So if you have the book, open to that page, and if you don't, just listen through. Let's begin. Judgment. Any momentary triumph you think you have gained through argument is really a pyrrhic victory. The resentment and ill will you stir up is stronger and lasts longer than any momentary change of opinion. It is much more powerful to get others to agree with you through your actions without saying a word. Demonstrate. Do not explicate. Okay, so the transgression of the law in 131 BC, the Roman consul Publius Crassus Dives Mucianus, Mucianus, laying siege to the Greek town of Pergamus, found himself in need of a battering ram to force through the town's walls. He had seen a couple of hefty ships mast in a shipyard in Athens a few days before, and he ordered that the larger of these be sent to him immediately. The military engineer in Athens who received the order felt certain that the consul really wanted the smaller of the mast. He argued endlessly with the soldiers who delivered the request. The smaller mast, he told them, was much better suited to the task, and indeed it would be easier to transport. The soldiers warned the engineer that their master was not a man to argue with, but he insisted that the smaller mast would be the only one that would work with the machine that he was constructing to go with it. He drew diagram after diagram and went so far to say that he was the expert and they had no clue what they were talking about. The soldiers knew their leader and at last convinced the engineer that it would be better to swallow his expertise and obey. After they left, though, the engineer thought about it some more. What was the point, he asked himself, in obeying an order that would lead to failure? And so he sent the smaller mast, confident that the consul would see how much more effective it was and reward him justly. When the smaller mast arrived, Mucianus asked his soldiers for an explanation. They described to him how the engineer had argued endlessly for the smaller mast, but had finally promised to send the larger one. Mucianus went into a rage. He could not concentrate on the siege or consider the importance of breaching the walls before the town received reinforcements. All he could think about was the impudent engineer whom he ordered to be brought to him immediately. Arriving a few days later, the engineer gladly explained to the consul one more time the reasons for the smaller mast. He went on, using the same arguments he had made with the soldiers. He said it was wise to listen to experts in these matters, and if the attack was only tried with the battering ram he had sent, the consul would not regret it. Mucianus let him finish. Then he had him stripped naked before the soldiers and flogged and scourged with rods until he died. Whipped to death. Crazy. The interpretation. The engineer whose name has not been recorded by history. Dang, and your recordlessness? The engineer whose name has not been recorded by history has spent his life designing masts and pillars and was respected as the finest engineer in a city that had excelled in the science. He knew that he was right. A smaller ram would allow more speed and carry more force. Larger is not necessarily better. Of course, the consul would see his logic and would eventually understand that science is neutral and reason superior. How could the consul simply persist in his ignorance if the engineer showed him detailed diagrams and explained the theories behind his advice? The military engineer was the consequence of the arguer, a type found everywhere among us. The arguer does not understand that words are never neutral, and that by arguing with the superior, he impugns the intelligence of one more powerful and that by arguing with the superior he impugns the intelligence of one more powerful than he. Okay. He also has no awareness of the person he is dealing with. Since each man believes that he is right and words will rarely convince him otherwise, the arguer's reasoning falls on deaf ears. When cornered, he only argues more, digging his own grave. Once he has made the other person feel insecure and inferior in his beliefs, the eloquence of Socrates, Socrates, could not save the situation. It is not simply a question of avoiding an argument with those who stand above you. We all believe we are masters in the realm of opinions and reasoning. You must be careful then. Learn to demonstrate the correctness of your ideas indirectly. Observance of the law. In 1504, in Florence, Italy, an enormous block of marble stood in the works department of the church of Santa Maria del Fiore. It had once been a magnificent piece of raw stone, but an unskillful sculptor had mistakenly bored a hole through it where there should have been a figure's legs, generally mutilating it. Piero Soderini, Florence's mayor, had contemplated trying to save the block by commissioning Leonardo da Vinci to work on it and some other master, but had given up since everyone agreed that the stone had been ruined. So despite the money that had been wasted on it, it gathered dust in the dark halls of the church. This was where things stood until some Florentine's friends of the great Michelangelo decided to write to the artist then living in Rome. He alone, they said, could do something with the marble, which was still magnificent raw material. Michelangelo traveled to Florence, examined the stone, and came to the conclusion that he could in fact carve a fine figure from it by adapting the pose in the way that rock had been mutilated. Soderini argued that this was a waste of time. Nobody could salvage such a disaster, but he had finally agreed to let the artist work on it. Michelangelo decided he could depict a young David, sling in hand. Weeks later, as Michelangelo was putting the final touches on the statue, Soderini entered the studio. Fancying himself a bit of a connoisseur, he studied the huge work and told Michelangelo that while he had thought it was magnificent, the nose he judged was too big. Michelangelo realized that Soderini was standing in a place right under the giant figure and did not have the proper perspective. Without a word, he gestured for Soderini to follow him up the scaffolding, reaching the nose. He picked up his chisel as well as a bit of marble dust that lays on the planks. With Soderini just a few feet below him of the scaffolding, Michelangelo started to tap lightly with the chisel, letting the bits of dust he had gathered in his hand to fall little by little. He actually did nothing to change the nose, but gave every appearance of working on it. After a few minutes of the charade, he stood aside. "Look at it now." "I like it better," said Soderini. "You've made it come alive." Interpretation. Michelangelo knew that by changing the shape of the nose, he might ruin the entire sculpture. Yet Soderini was a patron who prided himself on his aesthetic judgment. To offend such a man by arguing would not only gain Michelangelo nothing, it would put future commissions in jeopardy. Michelangelo was too clever to argue. His solution was to change Soderini's perspective, literally bringing him closer to the nose, without making him realize that this was the cause of his misinterpretation. Fortunately for posterity, Michelangelo found a way to keep the perfection of the statue intact while at the same time making Soderini believe he had improved it. Such is the double power of winning through actions rather than argument. No one is offended and your point is proven. Keys to power. In the realm of power, you must learn to judge your moves by the long-term effects on other people. The problem in trying to prove a point or gain a victory through argument is that in the end, you can never be certain of how it affects the people you're arguing with. They may appear to argue with you politely, but instead they may resent you. Or perhaps something you said inadvertently even offended them. Words have that insidious ability to be interpreted according to the other person's mood or insecurities. Even the best argument has no solid foundation, for we have all come to distrust the slippery nature of words, and days after arguing with someone, we often revert to our old opinion out of sheer habit. Understand this, words are a dime a dozen. Everyone knows that in the heat of an argument, we will all say anything to support our cause. We will quote the Bible, refer to unverifiable statistics. Who can be persuaded by bags of air like that? Action and demonstration are much more powerful and meaningful. They are here before our eyes for us to see. Yes, now the statue's nose does look just right. There are no offensive words, no possibility of misinterpretation. No one can argue with the demonstrated proof. As Ballister Garson remarks, the truth is generally seen, rarely heard. Sir Christian Wren was England's version of the Renaissance man. He had mastered the sciences of mathematics, astronomy, physics, and physiology. Yet, during his extremely long career as England's most celebrated architect, he was often told by his patrons to make impractical changes in his designs. Never once did he argue or offend. He had other ways of proving his point. I'll stop there because I'm messing up a lot. Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to stop at page 72 at the last paragraph in 1688. But thank you so much for joining my reading YouTube channel. Again, my name is Mistress Lavender. I'm reading the 40 Laws of Power, and we're in chapter 9 on page 72, last paragraph in 1688. I'll see you next episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn your post notifications on for daily reading videos. Bye!